SBC Media.
Welcome to iGaming Daily, analysing the news from the betting and gaming industry all over the globe. Supported by SBC Summit Latino America, bringing together the leadership teams and product specialists from retail and online operators in Latin American markets.
Discover the potential of Latin America's booming iGaming and sports betting markets at SBC Summit Latin America, the premier industry event in the region. Join SBC at the Seminole Hard Rock Hotel and Casino in Miami from October 31st to November the 2nd. Register now at sbcevents.com.
Good afternoon and welcome to the iGaming Daily, sponsored by the SBC Summit in Latin America. And today we're going to be talking about Chile, where the government has ordered a clampdown on sports betting sponsorships in the region. And I have two great guests today to join me in this conversation, fresh off the back of SBC Barcelona. Fernando, how are you, my friend?
Oh, great. Great to be here. Great to be back at the iGaming Daily podcast. We had a lot of fun in Barcelona and meeting everyone, and now really happy to go back to normal and discussing what's going on in the region, in Latin America, which is a lot, actually.
Yes, it certainly is a lot going on in Latin America, and it was one of the hot topics last week at Barcelona, actually. And Lou, obviously here as well. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. All recovered from last week, and I wanted to start on that before we get into the hot topic of Chile. Just wanted to get your perspective. Just one key takeaway that you had from last week in Barcelona. What was something that you took from the event or learned from the event?
Well, actually, you mentioned SBC Summit Latin America, and we had a meetup for the Latin peeps at the event, and it was great. There's a lot of excitement around the event that it's actually going to happen at the end of October, start of November, and yeah, there's a lot of regulatory things going on in Latam right now, especially with Chile, which is what we're going to discuss. Brazil, Peru, there's a lot of things, so people are excited.
Yeah, I second that wholeheartedly. I really noticed that from the conference room floor to the networking parties to the stages as well. I think everybody was talking about Latin America. And as you mentioned, specifically Brazil, such a big market opening up. And Fernando, anything that you really took from last week that you were surprised by or you were interested in?
Yeah, definitely the interest in Brazil. I mean, everyone was talking Brazil. Everyone was talking the Rio event that we're having next year. Really excited about it. And like Lou said, also the interest in the rest of Latin America, which is also pushing regulation forward, discussing regulation. We had the meetup. It was great. We met with a lot of people to discuss what's going on. We had a few laughs as well, which is very important because it's not all work. You have to chill out sometimes a little bit. But yeah, pretty much lots of interest towards Latin America.
Yeah, it certainly was, and certainly a lot of laughs as well. And as you say, that's very important. But right now, Chile is no laughing matter, Fernando. It's an interesting subject. It's an interesting country in terms of framework, in terms of the government orders on sponsorship. Can you just give us, as best you can, a brief oversight on what is going on in the country in terms of this latest news?
Well, like in pretty much everywhere else, sports betting and online casino has been working in Chile, has been operating, companies have been operating there for quite some time now. World-renowned companies we're talking about, they have presence there. They even have a strong marketing strategy with deals with sports organizations, sports teams. Tier 1, we're talking Tier 1 teams here like Colo-Colo, Universidad de Chile, and that it's actually part why we are here talking about this. But especially because the Supreme Court has recently ruled to block online gaming companies in the country in a case that involves Polla Chilena de Beneficencia, which is a state-owned company which actually does have explicit authorization to operate. They have a license to operate lottery-type games. They are have strong bond to sports because they have these little sports related games, and they called for an ISP, for an internet service provider, to block access to betting sites. They actually succeeded in their claim. The Supreme Court has ordered this ISP to block every betting site. It's 23, I think, if I'm not wrong. 23 companies that are going to be blocked by this particular ISP, which has, of course, led to like a domino effect, right? People are saying, or specialists are saying, okay, so if this company has to block the betting sites, every company does. Every company now every ISP has to block online betting websites. And there has been a strong push against betting operators online. And even the Chilean regulator, the Gaming Casino Superintendent, has assured in the past that it was not legal to operate. But since the law, like the current legislation, doesn't give the regulatory body the tools to take any measures, they were like, okay, we can only say that it's not allowed, but we can't do anything about it. So it was like a pretty weird scenario. We're talking about a very gray area in which the segment worked in Chile so far. And moreover, there's a conflict here because advocates for the iGaming segment have claimed that the Minister of Justice is actually biased, like in his role as a minister, because he was, until January, the lawyer for the Chilean Gaming Casino Association, the Chilean Gaming Casino Association, that's how you say it. And he was like January the 5th, he was their lawyer, and they are against online betting operations in the country. So they're basically facing very strong opposition, both from the judicial and the executive branches. So we'll have to wait and see what goes on from now on in Chile.
Okay, so a massive potential conflict of interest there. So just say that one more time. Who is the minister who is against with the conflict of interest?
Luis Cordero, he's the Minister of Justice and Human Rights. That's the full title of it. And he was, until January the 5th, a lawyer for land-based operators.
Okay, there we go. So yeah, a real potential conflict of interest there. And the regulatory. So these are not necessarily new rules, but they're just being implemented in a stronger way now, and that's what's led to this clampdown from the government on sports sponsorship for betting operators in the region. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. There was also a push for legislation to actually ban betting sponsorships, both for sports teams and organizations, events, everything related to sports. The deputy Marco Antonio Zulantay had pushed a proposed bill to actually ban those type of deals. It has been in the Congress for quite some time now. It's almost a year and a half. But I don't think that particular bill is going to make any more progress, because since the ruling from the Supreme Court has been so radical, so extreme, like it has already set up a ban for betting sponsorship. So we'll have to wait and see how the government approaches regulation and what type of room do they leave for companies to actually strike this type of deals, right? To sponsor teams or not, or maybe the regulation will ban them as well.
Yeah, well, Lou, that was actually my next question, I guess. We're obviously, and Fernando's not too optimistic. He, expresses that you're worried about this regulation. I'm not sure if you feel the same, but the regulation is in motion or formation of the regulation is in motion in Chile. It's being prepared. We're led to believe this framework is coming in terms of gambling. Is this clampdown, this latest clampdown by the government on sports betting sponsorships, an indication as to how strict that regulation will be? Or is it just sort of an isolated case? Should we not read too much into it in terms of how we predict that regulatory framework will look like?
I don't think the potential regulation will be as tough as what we've seen from this sponsorship ban, because like Chile is pretty different from what the neighboring countries, I would say. Even like, for example, Argentina, it's next to Argentina, and we've seen multiple markets regulate, and it's completely different from what we've seen in these Chilean proposals, I would say. Like, for example, when most of them were focused on regulating and legalizing gambling. They were focused on sponsorship deals between sports teams and sportsbooks. That's completely different from the trends that we've seen in LATAM. And also, like, you had people saying it was illegal, and then you had people discussing this in the Chamber of Deputies. So it's like it's a weird situation, because like you cannot regulate something that is illegal. It just cannot happen. And actually, we've seen this, for example, in Brazil. They included at the very last minute online gambling in the sports betting regulation. And there was people saying, how can you regulate something that wasn't actually legalized first? So it's a weird situation, I would say. And I do think that there will be some kind of like of domino effect once Chile regulates. And I fully believe that they will regulate. It's just simply hard to imagine that they will ban sports betting when all the South American countries are focused on moving things forward.
And yeah, that's an interesting point. And something else that I found really interesting, and it's from the summit in Barcelona that's just been, is, as we mentioned, LATAM was a hot topic. On the LATAM football panel, the host of some of the region's most recognizable sports teams were on stage discussing sports sponsorship and the region's approach to sports sponsorship. And one of the things they said was, unlike in Europe and in the UK, where fans are less receptive to betting partners, fans in Brazil and Argentina and South America are more receptive to betting partnerships, because they understand that the club needs the revenue. Do you think not having that fan hostility and having fans being receptive to sports betting partnerships is going to potentially just enable more complementary regulatory framework to sports betting partners within the South American leagues?
I think it would complicate things, actually, because, for example, and this is something that was discussed in Barcelona, contrary to what in Europe, it's like there's like owners, and I don't know, like from Middle East, they buy the clubs and they finance the teams, and you can expect a team to perform better once they have a new owner and stuff. That's pretty normal in the UK as well. In Latin America, not in Latin America, but in most South American countries, that's not the case. The clubs are like funded by fans, basically. They're members. We call them socios, and they pay quote every month, and then that's how the clubs survive. So if they're not I wouldn't say that if they're against gambling, they won't pay it. I don't think that's gonna happen, but there will be some backlash around these sponsorship deals. But I think it is important that we remember that the fans are basically what make the clubs work.
Yeah, but still, Chile is kind of moving towards that private scheme, is it? So they might not be so worried about that in the future, but still, fans are still going to be the ones that buy tickets, they buy the shirts, and provide you with big revenue. So they definitely want to keep fans happy. Still, I don't think there's much opposition from fans in Chile against betting sponsorship, since, like you said, Joe, in the panel from that was moderated by our good friend George Harborn, director of sponsorship at SBC. He representatives from River, from Racing, from Flamengo, from Botafogo said the same thing. We need that revenue. And fans understand we need it to build strong teams and to compete and to bring them joy when the team wins, right? Because if you can't build a competitive team, then fans are going to be more angry than if you actually sign a deal with a company they don't like.
Yeah, definitely. It was really interesting for me to hear that, because, in Europe and in the Premier League, especially, if a club announces a front of shirt partner that's an iGaming platform or a sports betting operator, then the backlash is significant, and it doesn't reflect well on the club, keeping the fans on side. So it was interesting to hear that for sure. And to bring it back to Chile and to a key partnership in Chile, obviously the Betson partnership with the Chilean top flight is that's coming to a halt now, I'm assuming.
Well, it is expected to come to a halt. I mean, there's other sponsorships in the country. There are several sponsorships with the top flight teams, like we said before, like UD Chile has Kaizen Gaming's Betano as its main sponsor. Betway had deals with 5 clubs. They already pulled the plug on those. Colo-Colo has a deal or had a deal with Coolbet. They will surely cancel that as well. And then there's the ANFP, the Chilean FA, which has its own deal with Betson, like you said. They sponsor the league as well as the national team. Sorry, and from the court ruling, they have started like Betway to cancel this sponsorship. So with the ruling forcing teams to do so, I mean. Yeah.
So, Fernando, that's Betway are cancelling that sponsorship, not the other way around, because it's really interesting to get into the nitty-gritty of the politics of it. The ANFP, who's the Chilean Football Association, the Chilean League, their president has said that Chilean law has no legal precedent allowing the governing body, to block club partnerships with online gambling firms. So that's sort of them setting out their stance that they're not going to enforce this on clubs, or they're unable to enforce this on clubs. That remains to be seen, but that seems like the cards they are playing. But from what you're saying is the operators are not really going to want to be part of partnerships that aren't endorsed by the regulatory framework and by the country's government.
Yeah, absolutely. This ruling kind of sets a scenario where the segment is kind of illegal, let's say. Also, teams and the ANFP could be considered to be partners with an illegal company. So neither teams and the ANFP want to be associated with that type of deal, nor do the betting operators. They don't want. I mean, we're talking about world-renowned betting operators here. We're not talking about some shady website from wherever. We're talking about our internationally famous companies which want to protect their image because they have worked hard to build it, right? So they want to stay compliant with government regulations, and that's why they have come to this common ground and say, okay, we have to cancel this because we can't go against what a ruling from the Supreme Court. Despite of that, there's some rumors from local media, from Chilean media, that say the ANFP might contest the Supreme Court ruling in order to keep the partnership until there's actual regulation in place. But again, we're talking about rumors here. This is mere speculation, so I'm not so sure what will happen. The most likely scenario I see is every sponsorship just cancel until there's more news about regulation.
Yeah, that's it will be fascinating to see what steps are taken. But I tend to agree with you that, protecting that brand image is so important, and working within the rules of the regulatory framework is a foremost priority for operators, specifically these types of operators we're talking about here. And specifically in Latin America at the moment as well, where, it's going to become a key market for a lot of these operators. So to protect their brand image there is vital. Chile obviously borders Bolivia, and that is a country that has been recently engulfed in a match-fixing scandal. Lou, what impact do you think this will have on... Do you think this will have any impact on Chile, and do you think it will have any impact on the overall regulation that we end up getting in Chile?
Yes, for sure. That's the easiest yes I've ever said in my life. I
mean, every country is taking the steps they think are proper to actually enforce sports integrity to a certain extent. I don't think the match fixing scandal in Bolivia, which in case you haven't heard, is so serious. It pushed the authorities to suspend the ongoing First Division League. So it's very serious. But I don't think it will have a direct impact on how regulation is designed from the effects of it. But I think the effect these type of things have, which I'm also including now. I'm also including now the scandal that's under investigation in Brazil as well. The effect this has is that politicians become more reluctant to push regulation forward, as they'd rather be silent instead of responsible for authorizing betting in their countries, right? Of course, we can see where this comes from, but it's still as negative as the match fixing fiascos themselves, because we know that non-regulation only allows every website, no matter the background it has, to just prey on a market that will be looking for options. Like we know Betson, we know Betway. We were talking about this just before. We know how they work under certain standards, how they comply with regulation when there is one. But delaying regulation only sets the table for those that are not so responsible as these companies that take the money without leaving any tax revenue, and those that don't deal with the side effects the activity might have on some segment of the population. So I think it might be negative from that aspect, like maybe it will delay regulation.
But what you're saying is regulatory framework, if rolled out in the right way, if it's the correct framework, it's going to have a positive impact in terms of stopping match fixing and boosting integrity.
Yeah, absolutely, because you can work with companies. You get to work directly side to side with these companies, with Betson, with Betway, with Coolbet, with everyone, and with, of course, the organizations like the IBIA and all the sports integrity organizations related to the betting industry. And if you don't regulate it, you are kind of limited in your range of action, because everyone gets to come in and prey on a market that there's a demand, right? There's people want to play. Yeah. People want to play, and if you don't give them regulated operators, they will go with the unregulated operators, and you have no control over that. It's much more difficult to fight every operator than just fighting a few that might still try to operate within a regulated market without having a license.
Yeah, that definitely is a delay in terms of slowing down of the that definitely is a risk in terms of delaying regulation. And I've got just a couple more for you. I'm conscious we're running long, but it's a really fascinating market, and it's one that's got the people talking. I think that was really showcased last week. But yeah, we see some comments today from the ANFP president. We see, the clubs are taking a stance. We see the government are taking a stance. We see, regulators taking a stance. How important, as regulation and regulatory framework is formed, that these different sectors aren't working in silos, and there is a level of collaboration in terms of forming the framework that is for Chile's gambling industry. And also, I guess that same principle applies to other Latin American regions or South American regions forming their framework.
Well, working together is probably the most important thing when discussing regulation, because you want to set up a framework that is both safe for the consumers as well as profitable for the companies, because no company will want to operate in your country if you have like a very high tax rate or very short license times or whatever. So you have to talk to the operators and see what they need in order to make a profitable industry, and from that point work towards setting up what you think as a government, as a regulator, as a proper framework to protect the population in your country. But again, it is very, very important to know how these companies work in order to then set up the phrasing of your bill or of your legislation in order to create the safest market possible for everyone, both for the the companies and the consumers.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's why the collaboration is key, because everybody's sort of working towards that same goal of a safe regulatory framework. And just to close, obviously next year there's a Copa America next year. Big tournament, always. It's always some fantastic football, always on show. Feels like it always grips the region of South America as well. How important is it for betting operators that regulatory framework is laid out by then and is implemented by then? And I'm not just thinking about Chile here, but thinking about Brazil as well. And I guess, how optimistic are you that we're closer to a regulatory framework by the Copa America next year?
Well, I think we have seen a big push in Brazil. So I'm quite optimistic about it. There's some complaints about the high tax rate. Like, ironically, that's why I was saying that in the previous answer. But I'm quite optimistic about Brazil. Not so much about Chile, because Chile has been delaying this for quite some time now. But this court ruling might speed things up a bit. And it's very important that they get the regulation as soon as possible. Maybe if they can't for the Copa America or for the Olympic Games, they need to enforce it like right away, because we were talking about how important it is for companies to have a proper regulatory framework to be profitable. But then again, if they are profitable, they are going to leave some tax money for you. They're going to leave tax revenue. Like if you read every time Coljuegos, the Colombian regulator, issues a report on their finances, they take pride on how the gaming segment is contributing to finance the health system. So I think that's proof of how important it is to have regulation enforced in order to both, of course, you get to create jobs, you get to get an entertainment segment for people, because we have to always remember that betting is part of the entertainment industry, and people need entertainment to continue living their lives, right? But then again, it helps funding other segments as important as it is the health system. So it's definitely important they move forward with it. I wouldn't be so optimistic about Chile passing regulation this year, but maybe, who knows, next year at some point they do.
Well, fingers crossed on that front. And obviously when they do, and any progression that is made with the framework, SBC Noticias is definitely the place to keep up with that news. And I look forward to speaking in the future on Chile and on Brazil and learning more on Latin America.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of iGaming Daily, brought to you in conjunction with SBC Summit Latino America, being held at the Seminole Hard Rock Hotel and Casino in Miami on the 31st of October to the 2nd of November. If you want to find out more about some of the subjects raised today, feel free to explore any of the sites in the SBC News Network. Happy reading.